Cooking instructions for these noodles will be in the description below. Hi, and welcome to today's tutorial on how to make homemade egg noodles. This is going to be my grandmother's recipe. I'm sure everyone's family has their own recipe and way that they do it. I'm going to show you 3 different ways on how to make these, 1 on a pasta maker and 2 by hand. Right now I'm just starting with 2 1/4 cups of white flour, and I'm piling it up on my countertop and making a little well in the middle. That's where I'm going to crack my eggs into whenever I mix them. This is going to take 5 to 6 eggs to get the right consistency of the dough. And if you want to save your counter from the mess, you can always mix this in a bowl and then dump it out onto the counter whenever you're ready to knead the dough. But you're just going to mix them in. I'm going to mix mine one at a time. You could just crack all of them in at once if you want to. It's just going to be a little bit more messy. But either way is fine. And you're going to continue to mix and then knead this dough until you get it all incorporated and you get a nice kind of dense but elastic dough like I have here. You're going to knead it until it's nice and smooth and it's not crumbling apart anymore. And then you're going to dust your countertop with a little bit of flour and you're going to roll it out. Here I'm cutting it into smaller sections because I'm going to run these through a pasta maker machine. So they have to be kind of smaller squares of dough. You're going to dust it with a little bit of flour to keep it from sticking to your machine or sticking to your counter. And I'm running this through on the thickest setting that I have, the widest setting on my machine. You're going to run it through once and then fold it over on itself, and then you're going to take it through again. And you don't want to force the dough down inside, you're just trying to hold it still while the machine pulls it in. And here you can see it once it's been run through once. I'm folding it in thirds over onto itself. I'm going to dust it with flour again to make sure it doesn't stick and get gummed up into that machine. And then I'm going to take it back through again on the roller setting. And then now I'm going to run it through one of my cutting blades. I'm going to run it through the one that makes the widest cut, which is the second one here that you see me putting it into now. And then you can see the noodles starting to come out on the other side. You'll want to kind of take your hand and lay those noodles over top. You don't want them to fall onto themselves and get stuck to each other. So you just want to kind of hold them and pull them a little bit as you run them through the machine. And then my machine came with this nifty little drying rack that you see in the back. I'm hanging the noodles over top of that. Alright, now we're moving on to the hand making of these, which is the old way. And if you don't have the drying rack that you saw in the background there, you can always take a linen tea towel or a flour sack towel, either lay it over the bar of a clothes hanger or over the back of a dining chair, and then lay your noodles over top of that until they dry. We've done it that way too the whole time I was growing up. Now this is the hand or manual way, I guess, of making the noodles. This is how we always did it with my grandmother. I'm going to show you 2 different ways of doing it. The first way is going to be more for like if you have small kids helping in the kitchen. This would be an easier way for them to cut the noodles. This part here, the rolling out of the dough by hand, takes quite a while. This is going to be like a 10-minute process of trying to get this dough stretched as thin as you need it to be for your noodles. You want it to be about 1/4 of an inch thick. and it's gonna take a while because this is a pretty dense dough, but eventually you'll get it. And you want to make sure that you have a little bit of flour down on your counter, otherwise you're going to smash your dough onto your counter and it's going to stick, and then it's going to rip apart when you try to pull it up. Alright, now that we've gotten this completely worked out to the width that we want it, or the thickness we want it rather, we're going to go ahead and cut these. If you have a child, a pizza cutter would be fine for them. You're going to try to make these noodles anywhere from 1/4 inch wide to 1/2 inch wide. It depends on your personal preference. When I cut them by hand, they are a lot wider than what my machine will make them. And you're just going to continue to run this pizza cutter and try to get them as straight as you possibly can. And then of course you're going to dust them with flour again to keep them from sticking to either the towel or to the drying rack or to themselves, whatever you're using to dry these with. You want to add a little bit of extra flour because as you work that dough with that rolling pin, it does get smashed into the dough and then it's going to get kind of sticky on you again. You want to try to pull these apart and separate them like I'm doing whenever you pick them up. And that's about how wide you're going to have them. I'm putting them back on my drying rack, but again, you can use a chair or a hanger. The second way to do them by hand, this might be if you're in a hurry to get them done or you're working by yourself, there's no kids in the kitchen, because this way we're going to use a sharp knife. But you're going to take and flour your dough once you've gotten it rolled out, and then you're going to roll it up. Just like you would roll like a paper or whatever into a scroll, but you're just going to roll this onto itself. But you want to make sure that you got this floured really good, that way it doesn't stick to itself. And once you've gotten it all rolled up, you're going to take your knife, and again, you're going to cut anywhere from 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch wide, however wide you want your noodles. And once you've gotten this entire roll of dough sliced, then we're going to take these and unroll them. And this way, I guess it's personal preference, but this way to me goes faster than the pizza cutter way, because you can just run down the whole length of this dough pretty quick if you're good with the knife. But you also want to make sure that your knife is sharp. You don't want a dull one, because if you're pushing a dull knife into this, what you're doing is you're going to smash the dough into itself, and then it's not going to unroll. It's just going to be a big blob whenever you get done with it. So make sure that your knife is a good sharp one, and you don't want a serrated knife. Serrated will do the same thing. It will push the dough into itself. You want a flat one with a sharp blade. Now here you can see we're going to start to unroll these. Your little spirals will roll out into your noodles. You want to do this with all of them, and then you're going to take these and hang them up to dry as well. Once your noodles have dried, they'll be nice and hard. You're going to take and put them into a freezer bag and put them into your freezer, and they will keep frozen up to 6 months, and you're going to cook them from frozen, not fresh like this. And the flour will thicken the broth that you have. If you want it to be a little bit more soupy, you'll just add more chicken broth or possibly even some water to thin it out when you're done. I like mine a little bit thicker, and I usually put mine over mashed potatoes.